back to Z's Corner. This is Al. So I haven't done a video in quite a few months, and there's a few reasons to it, and I'll just kind of go over it briefly. One, I got real busy in real life with my business, so I didn't really have that much free time. And number two, I got stuck in that mid-50s hump. Basically, it's a huge grind to go from Ops 54 to Ops 56 shipyard. I actually did an Excel spreadsheet that showed the cost to go from Ops 55 to Ops 56 shipyard, and it was something around $10,000 in packs at the time. Now, recently, Scopely has made some improvements in terms of quality of life for G5 players, mainly in regards to packs in terms of how many mats and resources that it gives you, as well as improvements on the multiphasic tokens that you get per pack when you buy from the Scopely store. So that's kind of gotten better over the past 2 or 3 months. It kind of got me back interested in the game, and most importantly of all, of course, just because in my server, at least on server 40, for a while there, a lot of our territory captures, so a lot of the big PvP gameplay aspect of it slowed down for the past few months. So and honestly, I'm a big PvPer, so that kind of curtailed my interest a little bit. But as you can see on the screen right now, we're talking about Incursions, and Incursions is a cross-server PvP event, which I was really excited for. And despite the hiccups on the first potential launch, we did end up having at least one of the events in July, and I just wanted to give a quick recap of how that event went. So without further ado, and I'm back to doing PowerPoint. So this is actually not going to have any real in-game footage or in the videos any videos that I recorded, just because it kind of got to be a bit too much because it was a 24-hour event. So we're going to go back to the PowerPoint format because I just find it easier to kind of talk to. And hopefully you still kind of get most of the learnings out of it. It just might not be as exciting as if there were things moving around on screen in a video of the action. But anyway, so back to the overview here. We're going to cover 4 main aspects of it. The event basics. I think some of the other content creators have already covered this. So I'm going to try and go pretty quickly over the event basics. And then we're going to talk about server strategy in terms of what you should try and do to kind of motivate your server and how do you kind of win the event itself. And then we're going to go into PvP examples. I've got a couple that I thought was pretty cool. And then we're going to go talk about areas for improvement for the next event. All right, so the event is 24 hours, like I mentioned before, and you kind of alternate between attack and defense. So in our example, at least, our server started out with attack, so I've got attack here, and then we went into defensive ops, and then we went back to attack, and we went back to defensive. So if you look at the total number of events, actually, there are about 7 total events. Then this includes the attack and defense that alternates, but it also includes a lot of the leaderboards, the solo leaderboards, the cross-server solo leaderboards. There's 3 of those. There's also a server milestone, and then there's the actual Incursions event itself, which determines, there's a point score assigned to each server and determines which server actually wins. So if we look at the solo milestones, this is what it looked like for Ops 55. This is just the top tier. I kind of didn't aggregate everything together, but basically, you get some parasteel, you get some mats, as well as the new Officer Una shards. And this is pretty nice. It's not like need to have just because it gets really tired to try and do all 4 of these solo milestones over a 24-hour period. So what I had actually ended up doing was I just did 3 of them. So I did the first attack, the first offense, and then I kind of fell asleep at around 11 o'clock at night. So I missed the second attack for us, but I did manage to get up at 6 a.m. so I could do second defensive ops. The other one I wanted to really kind of highlight is the cross-server leaderboards, and you can see that with the leaderboards, this is kind of where some of the rewards get interesting, especially with the champion and the raider leaderboards, because these give the subspace relay tokens, and this is what you need for that new subspace relay building. And the building itself actually gives some really good buffs in regards to specifically hull buff or hull health. So this is kind of where the bulk of the rewards are at. So and it's not as important, but it also gives you a little bit, is the infinite incursion. This is a server milestone. So you can see here you also get a little tiny bit of the subspace relay upgrades that you'll need for your building. And last but not least, the actual event in terms of whether your server wins or not. This only gives you And exocomp, so this first time it was build speed. I'm guessing the next time they'll do it, it'll be a research speed buff, a couple of shards of Una, as well as a little bit of the subspace relay token upgrades. So, as you can see from the event structure, though, the bulk of the rewards are in the solo milestones, as well as the solo leaderboards. So what does that mean? This kind of segues nicely to the next slide, which is really going to talk about server strategy. So in terms of server strategy, it's really about participation. So if you think about like advancement of the masses is what I said. If you think about the advances of the masses, really what's important is to get as many people on your server to participate in the event as possible, because not only are you awarded points for winning, you're also awarded points for losing. So as long as people are participating in doing their solo milestones, they're contributing to that server milestone, first of all, and then they also are placing at a lower rate, but still they're placing on some of the leaderboard events. So participation in the terms of a server is actually incredibly crucial. And the second point here is that the scoring actually favors people who are invading. And this is because if you look at the solo leaderboards, basically all of the events are favoring. They give more points for people who are invading other servers and are either winning or raiding or doing damage. And the damage, actually the whole damage server leaderboard event, it doesn't let you score at all if you're just defending. In regards to where that goes, it's definitely encouraging people to do invasions. But when you're invading still, you can expect to be hit, of course, but if you have a smart defense there, then you can actually potentially score very well and place significantly higher than where you might believe you'll be. And we'll kind of look at some of those examples in just a little bit. So again, I'm on server 40, and we were paired with server 41. And to be honest, it was not a really fair pairing because, basically server 40, our server has had access to G5 ships since about November 2021, whereas server 41 just got access maybe 1 or 2 weeks before the event actually started in this month, so July. So there's a huge time gap. There's like an 8-month time gap between the servers. So server 41 definitely didn't have as many advanced G5 ships, whereas some of our folks, we have G5 epics out, we have G5 rares out. Basically server 41, their whales were only just starting to get the G5 uncommons out. So definitely it was not something that server 41 could really win. And if we look at the scores right there, you see that in the end server 40 did win and server 41 lost. However, keep in mind that the awards for this just Infinite Incursions event by itself is not really that significant. It's really the cross-server leaderboards where most of the rewards are. So we'll take a look at those results right now. So it is not all as it seems from the previous slide. So if you look at the 3 cross-server leaderboard events, which I have the results posted on here, aside from the fact that I'm losing to a lot of retrievings as opposed to actual players, you can see that actually server 41 actually did place, in the Raider event, they placed in the number 1 slot. In the Champion event, they placed in this number 1 and number 2 slots, when they only kind of lost out a little bit on the damage dealer events. And keep in mind, in regards to where the rewards are, the most important rewards are actually the subspace tokens, subspace relay tokens, and those are actually in the Raider event and the Champion event. And the damage dealer event only gives you Una shards, which, while nice, are not really that important because Una as an officer, impulse speed upgrade, we already have some officers for that, like Huron, Claw, Pan. So Una, while nice to have, is not, I think, as necessary as having that subspace relay token to upgrade your subspace building, because that gives you a significant boost, again, to your whole health, which is very, very important for PvP. So anyway, so you can see that, despite server 41 losing, I guess, in terms of the overall event, some of their whales actually got significant rewards as a result, and they were actually in a better position if they were ever to match up against us again in the future, where they could potentially have a much better subspace relay building. on hand. So that's let's get to some examples, and we're just gonna look at the start screen right here. I was talking about smart defense. This guy, Valid from RNDT on server 41, was really smart about defending. He invaded. He was in a very hot system at a time when there was a lot of fights going on, and he really didn't really stand a chance because he's only Ops 44, so he doesn't really have even a G4 rare, let alone any of the G5 ships. So what did he do? He actually crewed really well for defense. So if you take a look at the right screenshot right here, you see that Valid from RNDT did really well against my Corvus because of his smart crewing. He did not put big ships on his station at that point. He only has a Rialta and 2 Orion Corvettes. Yet the reason why he was able to do about 2 to 3 million hull damage to my Corvus when I've got my base cracking crew on is because he's got Cross Captain on his Rialta. Because he has Cross Captain, that kind of negated Rom's Captain ability, which was really to suppress his fire for the first round from his ships and defense platforms. And that allowed his defense platforms to do the bulk of the work. And because of the way that firing patterns work, it prevented me from destroying everything in round 1. So he got good damage dealt to my ship. And remember, that really kind of helps them in regards to their overall Incursions events, but also it helps him significantly in regards to what he's placing on his leaderboard event. So on the screenshot on the left, I realized that ROM wasn't working, so I had to choose a different crew, and I chose a crew that kind of prevented his critical hits from his defense platforms. But at the same time, you see, he basically has the same crew there. What happens when I do that is that, I'm giving up extra shots that Rom had on his officer ability. So it takes me a bit longer to kill all the ships and his defense platforms. So I actually ended up taking an additional 2 million damage. So I probably took around, 4 to 5 million hull damage, and that really kind of helped him. And again, aside from that Enterprise that's shown on the left side of the hand, left screen, basically all the others. So the Rialta, the Corvette, they're instant repairs. As fast as you can click them. So while I was attacking this guy, it wasn't just me. It was me. It was a Direwolf who was level 60 with his 325 million power Rotaran. As well as maybe 1 or 2 other folks. In between our hits, he was able to just kind of repair all his ships, repair his defense platforms by clicking like a madman. So, what he did was that he really prevented us from kind of knocking him out and enforcing the shield. He was just repairing everything really quickly. He was still doing damage to our ships. We might have gotten 1 or 2 scoops off of him with our amalgams, but, it wasn't really that significant. From the majority of the time, as long as he was able to repair his defense platform first, before his ships, as long as he repaired 1 defense platform before he repaired his ships, our amalgams blew up. So this was really smart on the part of Valid. So I want to give shout outs and props to him for doing something like that. Even standing in the face of having an Ops 60 guy, shooting at his base when he's Ops 44. That really took some guts, and it was really smart in terms of what he did in terms of crewing to do the maximum amount of damage to our ships as possible to help him with his individual scores on the leaderboard event. All right, now that said, we're kind of going to run into some of the PvP examples I was going to talk about. I'm going to do a series of it. Basically, the first part is basically how I was losing to a server 41 player, Major Cuddles, and then how I kind of adjusted my crews to counter basically his crews. You see we both got Corvuses on the screen. Mine's tier 4, his is tier 3. So they're not quite the same, so I got a little bit of advantage, but despite that even, I don't know if he had Exos on or not. I don't think I had Exos on this fight, but despite that, he beat me handily in the first round because I was using my very generic crew, my default crew on the Corvus, where I have TOS O'Hara Captain, TOS Kirk, and HG Worf. So I'm going with both anti-critical hits for my opponents and critical hits for my ship. So he really countered me by having essentially anti-critical hits, so he counters my HG Worf, yet he has Marcus, which really does, again, more hull damage to my Corvus. So he won out significantly in this first round. So what did I do? I tried to do something that was maybe a little bit fancier, and it didn't really work out. So I swapped out HG Worf. I said no critical hits, but I will increase my mitigation to try and counter Marcus. Yet this did not work. It actually did worse for whatever reason, and I think it's mostly in regards to damage output. I wasn't doing enough damage to him either, since I have an explorer, and explorers do not have native, really high shield penetration either. So in this case, it didn't really work out too well. If he didn't have a Corvus and he had, let's say, like a Northcut, this type of crew might potentially have worked a lot better, because my native accuracy against the Northcut's native dodge would have offset some of this stuff. Whereas here, I was just basically doing much less hull damage than what he was able to do, even with my max Gowron on my ship. So after this, I try to change up the crews again, and in this case, I kind of won. So I won in this case because I said I really don't care about anti-critical hits, because he doesn't have HE Warp anyway. I'm going to use Yuki and Marcus. So remember, Yuki with Marcus's synergy, I'm taking away 15% of his shield health. So I'm cutting through his shields a lot faster, and as soon as I cut through his shields, I can do much more damage to his hull. So basically, that's what I was doing. So I was buying time with Gowron. So again, I increased my mitigation, yet I was cutting through his shields, but I also increased my own shield penetration with Marcus on the bridge in addition. So I was doing more hull damage. So as you can see here, I won pretty handily against Major Cuddles in this fight. So what happened next? So Major Cuddles used the same crew that I had in the screenshot before, yet I switched up again. In this case, I won pretty handily again. Why is that? Because I used Lorca Captain. So again, what I did was I went all out damage, right? So Lorca Captain, again, I get a hull breach. I have HE War with the critical hits. So remember, hull breach plus critical hit, I'm doing maybe about 1.5, 1.8x times damage compared to what Major Cuddles is doing, even with Yuki, even with HE Worf at the helm. And in addition, Lorca Captain has a little bit of benefit from his Captain ability, which is reducing player damage. So in this case, I was able to defeat his copy of the crew that I had before. So again, after this, I think Major Cuddles is kind of trying different things. So he put a Gorkin on again for the hull breach maneuver, but just a quick note here, Gorkin is good for hull breach. He actually has a higher proc percentage chance than Lorca is by default. However, remember, Lorca can always proc at the beginning of the round. Now, that might not sound like much because Gorkin only procs upon critical hit. It might not sound like much, but it means that in round one, with my very first hit, I can do significant more damage. So that is actually quite significant, in addition to his little bit of bonus of having Lorca Captain with the reduced player damage during PvP. So again, he did better with this because he was doing as much damage as I was, but I still ended up winning out over him in the end. Now, here's the last of the series that I want to kind of talk about, and this is where it kind of comes full circle. So Major Cuddles kind of gave up on the previous crew, so he copied my crew with Lorca Captain, HE Worf, and Marcus, and then I went back full circle with my default crew. Now, why is that? Because with TOS Uehara, I'm killing his critical hits. So in one move, I knocked out Lorca, the bulk of Lorca's ability. I knocked out his HE Worf's ability, so he was left only with the Marcus, the shield penetration ability on his Corvus. Yet for me, I was still doing significant damage in regards to having critical hits. So this kind of went around full circle, and I won with my crew here again. So a lot of people keep asking me, hey Zhao, what's the best crew for X, Y, and Z ship? And I hope this series really kind of tells you that there is no one best crew. It really depends on who your opponent is, what their ship is, and how they're crewing. So PvP, the beauty of PvP and why I like it so much is because it's part of it's like a mind game. The other part of it is that it's so dynamic and fluid. You always have to keep on guessing what your opponent's going to do. You have to keep on adjusting your crews to kind of counter where he's going, and hopefully you manage to stay basically a step ahead of where he's at. So anyway, this was a really good fight series with Major Cuddles, and I want to thank him anyway. I think this was mostly done in our designated system for the solo milestones, so it kind of really helped me complete my solo milestones pretty quickly. So again, major shout out to Major Cuddles for helping out on this, and much respect in terms to what you were able to do, and basically a week or two to kind of get a Corvus out, a G5 Uncommon out from when your cap was lifted. So that was really fun on my end. All right, so let's wrap up the video basically in terms of areas for improvement. Hopefully Scopely can take some of this into consideration. So number one, because the scoring is as it is right now, it would probably be better to give more free conduits for everybody involved. We had a lot of folks who, for whatever reason, weren't able to complete some of the solo events prior to Incursions started, so they didn't have any conduits on hand at all. So they couldn't participate in an attack, and they could only do defense. That was at a real detriment for them because, one, they missed out on 2 of the 4 of the solo milestones, but more importantly, they couldn't score as well for the leadership, for the leaderboard events, and for 2 of the 3 leaderboard events, and for 1 of them, they couldn't score at all because the whole image dealer was only for invaders. You know what I mean? So that was kind of not helping the overall participation picture for the server. And then the other component is, well, if you don't give more conduits for all, is that if you could revamp scoring and to have the scoring not be focused as much on invading, because right now there's no incentive for defending. The bulk of the wars, the most important part of the wars, the scoring is skewed in terms of like a 3-to-1 skew in favor of invaders. So as long as you complete your solo milestones during whichever part of the event, like for your defensive ops, as long as you complete your solo milestones, there was really no reason for the whales to kind of stay and defend. I mean, yes, you're staying defending to prevent from losing, but again, look at where the rewards are. The rewards are mostly in the leadership leaderboard events and not in the overall Incursions event. So it kind of led most of the whales, at least towards the back half of the event, it led most of the whales towards more just invading and leaving their own server to be as it was. So, and the other thing is, I put a question mark, is to consider kind of doing a 12-hour event and not a 24-hour event, just so we can get some sleep. Instead of having, each segment be 6 hours, maybe consider cutting it to 3 hours each. It might be better for participation, and it would probably make it much more fast-paced as well. So those were some of my thoughts in terms of areas of improvement. Overall, I'd say that Incursions was really fun. It's something new, and despite all the other issues that happened. Oh, and one of the things I didn't entirely talk about was server lag. There was definitely server lag. I don't know how much or to what degree server can kind of fix that, or Scopely can fix the server lag. Hopefully they can. So in summary, if you ask me to score the event, I'd probably, on a scale from 1 to 10, 10 being the best, 1 being the worst, I'd probably give it somewhere around the 7.7. I'd say. I mean, it was really entertaining. It was fun. It got to be a little bit long. There weren't enough participation because some people just didn't have conduits. And the scoring really basically favored whales to invade other servers as opposed to helping defend our own server. So, those things, as long as they fix that, I think we can move from a 7.7, and I guess server lag, if you kind of fix server lag, you can move from a 7.7 up to maybe like an 8.5, 8.8, or even better. So I had a lot of fun. My guess is that this type of event is going to be something that's going to happen once or twice a month, because this is basically the only way for you to get Una shards. It's also the only way for you to get the subspace relay tokens for you to upgrade the subspace building. You can't even buy packs for that at the moment. So it's something that's definitely going to be in here for the long term. So as long as Scopely kind of implements some improvements to the mechanisms of the game, if they can improve some of the server lag, if they can do a better job or at least switch up the server matchups between matches, I think this can be pretty fun. So with that, thank you for tuning in to this episode of Z's Corner. Hopefully I will kind of get back on the bandwagon where I can at least do maybe 2 or 3 videos a month. I'll think about some of the content. Again, it's going to be more PvP focused. So thank you again for tuning in. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment below.